Hello and welcome to WION World is One. I am Ghadi Francis and this is the West Asia Post, our weekly show where we bring you all the latest updates and stories from this region. For years, the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has been an international pariah. At the beginning of the Syrian civil war, it looked like the end was near for the leader. But now, 10 years later, Bashar al-Assad is making a comeback to the world. More Arab nations are normalizing ties with Syria, despite the U.S. opposition to his rule. This time it is the Emirates. Bashar al-Assad visited the UAE in what was his first visit to an Arab state since the Syrian civil war. Now in our next report, we tell you all about the return of Bashar al-Assad.
In 1992, Bashar al-Assad moved to London. He was the son of then Syrian President Hafez al-Assad, but had very little political aspirations. Instead, his brother, Bashar al-Assad, was being groomed. But fate had other things in mind. A brutal car crash killed the dynamic prince, turning his brother's life upside down. Bashar al-Assad was transformed overnight from being an obscure London eye doctor to the heir apparent of Syria, taking on a crown that was never his. One that sealed the future of Syria. In his first few years as Syria's president, Assad promised a shift from his father's iron grip. He seemed to adopt several liberal reforms, offering space to his opponents and overtures to Western foes. A period painted as the Damascus Spring, but things turned sour soon. As protests erupted against his rule, reforms were swiftly buried. The focus was on the growing fire of revolution. The Arab Spring that was engulfing all of West Asia. Since then, a civil war has killed thousands, displacing millions in the country. Bashar al-Assad became an outcast. He had no friends in the Arab world. He was presiding over a broken state, stuck largely alone in his presidential palace. His Arab allies had abandoned him. He was charged with war crimes and was dependent on his only ally, Russia. But a decade later, the din of the war has receded. The region has grown tired of the conflict, thus leading to the emergence of an unlikely dynamic. International pariah Bashar al-Assad is now in demand. The Syrian president was recently in the UAE, his first visit to an Arab state since the Syrian civil war. This visit was crucial for the Syrian leader. It shows warming ties with a US-allied country that once backed the rebels that sought his ouster. Assad's only trips during the war were to Iran and Russia. The visit to the oil-rich UAE was crucially timed as well. It was on the anniversary of the Syrian uprising 11 years ago. This visit now opens the door for Assad's return to the Arab fold. It also highlights a more assertive United Arab Emirates, one willing to upset its ally, Washington, by wooing Assad. Many even say that the normalization is not new. It began in 2018, when the UAE reopened its embassy in Damascus. While the US says it opposes any normalization with Syria, UAE's self-perception is at the heart of its policymaking. It sees itself as the leader of the Arab world, and Washington has eroded its political capital with Abu Dhabi. So, Nahyan's meeting is a part of a bigger Arab world push to reintegrate a country that they have shunned during its decade-long civil war. The Arab League is also widely expected to reinstate Assad's membership shortly. For many, this portrays Assad as the Pyrrhic victor of the war. But in reality, the normalization indicates that the desire for regional stability, a desire that is almost bigger than concerns over his leadership, most of it has to do with Syria's historical role in the region and the modern state that was created by Assad's father. For many, this portrays Assad as the Pyrrhic victor of the war. President is back in the fold, no normalization can wipe off the last decade of destruction. While many are calling this the return of the lion, others say that Assad is ruling over mere rubble. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
From Saudi Arabia to Yemen, Lebanon and Kuwait. Don't go anywhere, we have a lot more lined up for you in this edition of the West Asia Post. But first, let's take a look at what else is making the headlines across the region.
Leaders of Egypt, Israel and the United Arab Emirates met for a three-way summit at the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh. The summit was the first of its kind since the UAE normalized relations with Israel. Lebanese Prime Minister called for a need to stop all Lebanon-originated activities that affect the security of Saudi Arabia, a statement that was received positively by the kingdom. Germany and Qatar have sealed a long-term gas deal as Europe's biggest economy seeks to become less dependent on Russian energy sources. Saudi Arabia's oil exports have recorded a significant jump of 57.5% on an annual basis, amounting to $8 billion during the month of January. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to travel to Israel and the West Bank on March 26th. The trip aims to deepen bilateral relationships and also strengthen regional security. Iran says the revival of a 2015 nuclear deal between Tehran and world powers can happen in the short term. This is only if the United States show pragmatism in Vienna negotiations. A Lebanese military court has charged Christian politician Samir Geagea over deadly clashes in Beirut last October, according to judicial sources, a move that could stoke tensions in the country ahead of the parliamentary elections.
The United States has stepped up its military support for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia over the past few months. Now this comes at a time when Saudi Arabia is being struck by missiles from Houthi rebels, an indication from Washington that it is trying to mend its strained ties with traditional Gulf allies. But this desire for improved relations comes with the need for Saudi Arabia to amp up its oil production. We tell you more.
West Asia, a region that is a top priority for all US presidents. When Biden entered the White House last year, his aim was to recalibrate United States West Asia policy. But it looks like some relations are beyond repair. Like that with key ally Saudi Arabia. Under Donald Trump, Saudi Arabia had a long rope. The president overlooked its dismal human rights record. The murder of Khashoggi and the war in Yemen did not bother him. But under Biden, all of that changed. He did not call Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He released declassified intelligence reports on Khashoggi's killing and documents looking into Saudi's connection to the 9/11 attacks. Since then, the US-Saudi relationship has been on the rocks. The traditionally strong alliance had hit a rough patch. Even before the invasion, US officials had been beating a path to Riyadh. However, the initial response from the Saudis had been cool. Now faced with new geopolitical realities, Washington is pivoting hard. The US has approved missiles and defense system sales to Saudi Arabia. This includes 280 air-to-air missiles valued at up to $650 million. Sources suggest that Washington even sent Patriot missiles, the same Patriot systems that they moved out of Saudi Arabia last year. This is because Riyadh says its Patriot interceptors are running low. It needs more to defend itself against Houthi attacks. US is stressing the defensive nature of military support to Gulf states. But many say it could extend to offensive operations in Yemen. Currently, the defensive-offensive differentiation is a bit fuzzy. It is more of a game of semantics than actual deterrence. Renewed US support could lead to coalition airstrikes once again. Another factor could be Saudi's deepening ties with both Russia and China. Riyadh has signaled it wants closer ties with Beijing. The kingdom even invited the Chinese president to visit this year. Reports suggest the two nations are even in talks to price some crude it sells to China in yuan. If Saudi Arabia does that, it will change the dynamics of the forex market. The move might even prompt other buyers to follow. Some suggest that this is just an old threat to push back at the West. Any shift to the yuan will face practical challenges. This is because of three main reasons. One, crude oil is priced in dollars. Second, the Saudi riyal is pegged to the greenback. And three, the dollar's leading role as a reserve currency. There may be some contracts in yuan between Saudi Arabia and China, but nothing suggests a reorientation of the Saudi monetary policy. Currently, Biden has an uphill task ahead of him. He needs to convince Saudi Arabia to boost oil production, but that will not be without caveats. This is a regime he once sought to isolate or avoid, but with oil prices soaring, he's turning to Riyadh. The question remains, will Saudi Arabia finally respond? West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
Over 10,000 children have been killed or injured since the war broke out in Yemen 7 years ago. For the people living amid this war, the situation is dire. They are being deprived of their basic medical needs and life-saving surgeries, which are the need of the hour in the nation. We bring you the story.
This is 5-year-old Amina Nasser, hugging her toys in a cancer ward in Yemen. Amina's life is in the hands of a collapsing healthcare system, one that has been eroded by Yemen's 7-year-long war. Amina lives in the middle of rudimentary equipment, peeling paint, and the stench of urine. She gets free chemotherapy, but her parents are struggling to afford medicines and other tests.
The patients who come to Al Jamouria Hospital are poor and live in the suburbs, where the simple medical supplies are non-existent at the hospital, such as bandages, sterilized tools and medicines like antibiotics. So patients end up spending a lot of money to provide these supplies. There is a severe shortage in medical supplies here.
Like Amina, millions of Yemenis are struggling to receive life-saving treatment. Some don't even receive proper care in time. Like 16-year-old Zamzam Hizam. She was waiting for a sponsor to pay for her heart surgery when gangrene caused by the untreated ailment ate away at her foot.
She suffers from a congenital defect, which led to the failure of the patient ductus arteriosus to close. In addition to that, she has severe inflammation of the valve, which ruptured one of the valve ligaments. Therefore, the valve is now severely infected.
In room 11 of the same hospital, Hassan Mohsen Al-Raisi is sitting on his mother's lap. The 1-year-old has a hole in his heart, and his parents are desperate. They need to travel abroad for surgery, but the blockade means that they are left without any options.
The doctors who did the echocardiography check for him and noticed a hole in the heart and said he needed a surgery abroad. We could not travel because of the blockade. A siege by land, sea and air. How can we travel? In addition to the financial cost. The cost is very high.
The war in Yemen has destroyed its health system, hindered the entry of foreign surgeons and restricted travel abroad. Only half of Yemen's medical facilities are fully functional. Public hospitals lack basic equipment as well as staff. Doctors and nurses prefer to work at private clinics or international organizations.
We are suffering from low and delayed salaries, and they blame the lack of financial consolidation, but this was not the case before.
This is a war that the world has forgotten. Millions are starving, poverty is rising, and a child is dying every 10 minutes. Yemen is the world's biggest humanitarian crisis, and it seems to be going from bad to worse. With medicines and aid dwindling, Yemen now risks losing an entire generation of children. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
Lebanon's central bank governor Riyad Salameh has been charged with illicit enrichment and money laundering. It is the first criminal charges against the veteran banker. Now in Lebanon, many consider Salameh one of the main players in the country's financial meltdown. Now Lebanon still has the governor's brother in custody. We tell you more.
This is Riyad Salameh, the governor of Lebanon's central bank or Banque du Liban. Salameh has steered Lebanese finances since 1993. He has looked after it through the post-war recovery and bouts of unrest in the West Asian nation. He was once praised as guardian of Lebanon's financial stability, but now he has been charged with money laundering and corruption. The charges are related to illicit money laundering. Salameh and his brother had formed 3 companies in France. It was used to buy real estate in France worth nearly $12 million. The central bank governor has, however, denied all such charges. Salameh's personal finances are being investigated by several nations. These probes have fed judicial inquiries in Lebanon. But this is not related to one man or one institution. It hints at a bigger problem in Lebanon, where the elite are hoarding most of the country's wealth. In 2015, the IMF detected a $4.7 hole in the central bank's reserves. What Salameh was doing was this: offering Lebanese banks interest rates that would reach double figures. This move was to attract dollars, but these were rates that the bank would never be able to repay. So the result was this: the fiscal deficits kept widening. The bank was calling this financial engineering. Others called it a Ponzi scheme. Lebanon is going through its worst economic crisis in decades, one that has been the result of poor financial policies. The dollar has plunged, fuel and medicines are running out, and prices of basic necessities are soaring to a record high. But it looks like the rich in Lebanon are only getting richer. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
Kuwait is one of the hottest places on earth. Temperatures there reach up to 53 degrees Celsius on some days, making it unbearable for humans to set foot outside. But despite that, the country continues to lag on its climate action. It continues to burn oil for electricity and ranks among the top per capita global carbon emitters. We tell you more.
Climate change, it is heating up the world. But here in Kuwait, temperatures are becoming unbearable. Record heat waves roast Kuwait each season. Now they have grown so severe that people can't step out. By the end of the century, being outside in Kuwait City could be life-threatening. Here are some numbers. The mercury here sometimes tops 53 degrees Celsius. 67% of heat-related deaths in the capital are due to climate change. Migrants are particularly vulnerable to hot temperatures, with their risk of mortality tripling while working in the heat. Renewable energy accounts for less than 1% of the demand, far below Kuwait's target of 15% by 2030. Kuwait remains among the world's top oil producers and exporters. Per capita, it is a significant polluter. But in the COP26 summit last year, Kuwait remained silent. All of the region's petrostates joined a chorus of nations setting goals to eliminate emissions at home and racing to furnish their climate credentials. But Kuwait had the same promise even in Glasgow to cut emissions by 7.4% by 2035. But Kuwait keeps burning oil for now. The reasons are this. 1, because of populist pressure in parliament. And 2, the authorities regulating emissions get all of their revenue from pumping oil. The focus is on preserving Kuwait's lavish welfare state, believing that the government lacks accountability. So the result is the cheapest electricity rates and petrol prices in the world. Currently, Kuwait is distracted, blind to the long-term threat of climate change. But ignoring it will not make the climate crisis go away. With crucial resources running low, climate change will have to be higher up on the agenda. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
West Asia is not without its culture, beauty and oddities. In our next segment, Curiosities, we bring you some heartwarming stories from the region. That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, bringing you more stories from West Asia. Until then, stay safe. I am Ghadi Francis, coming to you from Beirut, Lebanon. And you're watching WION. World is One.